Welcome back to the third episode of Learning Wedding Videography. This episode is all about the time after the ceremony and when the guests sit down for food, the wedding breakfast. This series is aimed at wedding filmmakers who have maybe been filming weddings for a year to absolute beginners. My aim is to give you the confidence to film weddings and get an idea of what to expect. Almost behind the scenes without actually going behind the scenes. I'll be covering the exact settings I use, equipment, and how I film each situation. So please like and subscribe, make sure you hit that bell button so you're notified of my latest video. Last video was all about the wedding ceremony, a very important part of the whole day. So if you haven't watched that already, it might be worth watching that one after this. Usually at this point in the How to Film a Wedding series, I will talk about my equipment, but before I do, I want to let you know what to expect first. Timing wise, I find most couples plan 2 to 3 hours between the ceremony ending and the wedding breakfast beginning. Most weddings I film, either a church or a venue, will do some sort of confetti shot straight after the ceremony. Then it could be the group photos to general guest mingling. There might be some entertainment such as games, magicians or musicians. The photographer and I will also do couple shots in this time, plus maybe later at golden hour. So I'll do a separate video covering the couple's photo shoot. Then the couple usually view the room before all the guests enter. Once the couple and venue are happy with the room, all the guests come in and find their seats. The couple are announced in, everyone cheers. Sometimes they go straight into speeches, or the food is served. Then after food, the speeches. Or the worst situation, a different speech between courses. And this is what typically happens between the ceremony ending and the food. So now let's look at the equipment that I use to film this part of the wedding. As always, I have my trusty C200 and monopod. Attached to this is my Rode NT-G4 Plus and my go-to lens, which is the 24 to 70mm. I may use some sort of audio device to capture the musicians, but this is rare and only on special requests, as I usually don't use music recorded on the day, just from Soundstripe. A few months ago, I did record the groom's sister singing, and then the groom sang as well. In this case, I had plugged my Zoom H1 straight into the back of a speaker. Just make sure you check the levels and make sure they're all okay, but it is pretty simple to do. Let's have a look at my camera settings. Unless it's confetti or couple shots, I always use 25 frames per second, shutter 50, ISO 800, unless it's dark I boost it, or too much light I'll use an ND filter, C-Log 3 to color grade in post, f-stop 2.8 unless it's group photos, and then white balance usually 5600 Kelvin, but if there's a mix of lights sometimes I have it on auto balance. Now you know what to expect and my usual camera settings, let's look at each part in more detail. The confetti shots. We have a few options here when it comes to movements. I used to use a gimbal and track backwards, but now I usually stand halfway down the line next to the photographer. Once the couple have reached me, I usually run back to the end of the line and get a similar shot again. Sometimes it's not a line, it can just be a semicircle with the couple in the middle. So I usually try to stand a few feet away centrally and get most of the guests in plus the couple. I like to film this shot in slow-mo, so this is where my settings change from my usual standard ones that I mentioned earlier. In this case, it'll be 50 frames per second, shutter speed 100, then everything stays the same. 800 for ISO, C-Log 3, f-stop 2.8, and my normal white balance. For group shots, I like to film most of them, but I don't always include them in my feature film. I explain this to the couples. Sometimes I will even film the photographer taking the photos and then get a close-up of that group photo. I like to mix the shots up, so wide, then close up, and I usually let the photographer lead this part. I just sit back and relax. Bridesmaids and groomsmen usually have a bit more movement. You can have walking shots, but again, I usually just let the photographer lead this bit, but they may ask for some ideas. My settings do change here slightly from my standard ones, so I still use 25 frames per second, shutter speed 50, ISO 800, C-Log 3, but my f-stop will be more like 5.7 just to make sure I get everyone in focus. And I will still use autofocus, but it'll be aimed at the bride and groom. When it comes to guest mingling, I always use wide shots, then close-ups of that wide shot. Try and get guests having things from canapes or drinks, filming them having fun and playing games. If there's a musician, again, I usually get a wide shot, then a close-up. With magicians, I'll film some of the trick, but I love to get the reaction from the guests as well. Guess what? I'll also film that in wide shots and close-ups. The settings for all of this will be my standard settings: 25 frames per second, shutter speed 50, ISO 800, C-Log3 to colour grade in post, f-stop usually 2.8, and my white balance usually 5600 Kelvin if there's plenty of light. Otherwise, again, if it's indoors in a mix of lights, I might just have autofocus. My next video will be the couple photo shoot, so make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll skip this part and talk about the wedding breakfast room. The photographer will also be taking photos of the room, but I like to as well. My last video of the series will be talking about my feature film and how and why I use these shots. And I will get a mix of wide and close-ups, filming all the detail stuff. And if they've got other details around the venue, I always get similar sort of shots. My tip here is I actually then use a screenshot of some of those close-ups. Again, my settings will be my standard ones: 25 frames per second, shutter speed 50, ISO 800, C-Log3, and my f-stop is usually 2.8, nice bit of depth of field, and again, white balance 5600 Kelvin. And it's usually on autofocus as well. So then after this, the guests come into the room. So scenario 1, the guests come in, then the couple, then they sit down for food. I usually film the guests looking at the seating plan, finding their seats, sitting down. When the couple is announced, I also have my camera pointing at the doors. Then once they're sitting down, I film staff bringing the food. I then like to get a wide shot of the room and then I leave. At this point, if I haven't already, I get my drone shots of the venue as no guests will be in the shot. I will film in my standard settings. And things to remember at this part is that when you're filming the door for the couple coming in, the guests may be already sitting down at this point and you think you have the perfect shot. Then all of a sudden they stand up and your shot's blocked. So just bear that in mind. Audio-wise, I just use the Rode mic to capture the announcement. Sometimes in the past I have used one of my TX650s. Also, different cultures may have different traditions like this one. And they had a little ceremony bread thing, and the guests all dance for about 5 minutes. Scenario 2, guests come in, then the couple, and they go straight into speeches and then sit down for food. In this case, everything stays the same as in scenario 1, but I would have already mic'd up everyone with my Sony TX650s, have my B-cam ready, but you usually have a few minutes to sort yourself out. But I'll talk more about this in more detail in the dedicated speeches video. So that's it. Go and relax for a couple of hours, small talk with the photographer, get tips from them on how to run a business, especially if they've been doing it for a few years. You can get some social media footage as well, tag yourself at the venue. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you haven't already seen my other 2 videos in this wedding series, they're definitely worth a watch. And stay tuned for all my other videos. Ciao.